Is Governmental Affairs Office.
Morris Chan, representing Borough President's Office.
My name is Jamie Rogers. I am the chair of Community Board 3.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Mi-Fong Chung, Chair of Land Use on Community Board 3.
Susan Stetzer, DM, CD3.
Go ahead. Sandra Pierre, HPD, Office of Asset and Property Management.
Sophie Feldman, HPD Office of Action and Property Management. HPD, I'm sorry, David Lipsky, Asset Management.
Luis Salguero, HPD, Asset Management.
Mark Matthews, Asset Management, HPD.
April Tyler, co-chair, Housing, Land Use, Zoning, CB9.
Marie Wakefield, Community Board 11.
Donna Gill, co-chair, Housing, Community Board 10.
Amanda Fencer from New Jersey General's Office.
World Community General's Office.
Thank you for coming.
Vern Ballard, HDFC.
Talk up, guys, so you can hear you.
Vern Ballard, an HDFC shareholder.
Great,
Michael Palmer, the HDFC Coalition.
great.
Sylvan Valderlo, HDFC shareholder.
Purva Bailey, HDFC shareholder. Natalie Rousseau, HDFC shareholder.
Marisol Fernandez, Summer Industry.
That's the best. You're a summer intern. That's the best.
Stephanie Arroyo, Melissa Margaret Vehicles Office.
Phyllis Davis, HDFC shareholder.
Great, okay.
Holly Chu with the Manhattan Borough President's Office.
Rosal Rodriguez with the Borough President's Office.
Wayne Benjamin, Chair of Land Use for CB12 and an HDFC shareholder.
Wally Rubin, District Manager, Community Board 5.
Audrey Isaac, CB7.
Gary Weinberg, CD9.
Hannah Whitaker.
Great,
Samantha Catan, UPAP.
great. And Michelle Ullman and I, we've known each other since high school, and she's the best math teacher in the United States. She lives in California. We want her to be in charge of math at the Department of Education. Just so you know, there's nobody better in the United States for teaching math. Go ahead.
Paul Westbrook, Councilmember Keeler's office.
Rebecca Kerman, Speaker's Office.
Jack Cole, Councilmember Markle's office.
Okay.
Louis Colbrand, Councilmember Johnson's office.
Eric already did. Anybody else back there? Okay. All right, so let's look at the minutes from the last meeting of June 16th. Is there a motion to accept them? Yes, Jim? Okay, second?
Sure.
Okay, Rick, all in favor to accept the minutes? Aye?
Aye.
Okay. Any nays? All right, so I know that Alvin is on his way, Deputy Borough President Alvin Bonilla, but if it's okay with you, at HPD, we'll just start with your presentation. Is that okay? All right, so thank you very much. And as people come in, when you're finished, we can introduce. I'll move out of the way so you can see the presentation. And thank you very much, HPD, for being here. This is not an easy topic. So I appreciate very much your introduction, and I'm sure there'll be many questions. When we do questions, we're gonna have questions from staff of the council, staff of the boards, and the boards. Just that's how we're gonna do it. Okay, so if people have questions from the audience and the boards, and make sure that your chair or the representative of your chair has that question. Okay, go ahead.
So good morning, everyone. My name is, again, Anne Marie Hendrickson, and I'm the Deputy Commissioner at HPD's Office of Asset and Property Management. I'm going to be presenting, and first of all, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to present HPD's, what we call our Preserving At-Risk Affordable Home Ownership, HDFC Co-ops, in our community. Let me just give the preamble here and say that this represents work that has been done over the last probably 2 years since Commissioner Bean has come into HPD. She has been very concerned about preserving and what our efforts are going to be to keep our HDFCs in affordability. It is a very complex problem, as the Borough President explained, has many stakeholders. We have worked at HPD with many people in this room, many advocates, to kind of come up with a policy and a way, again, to preserve our valuable assets. I'll tell you right now that I know some people have seen some of this information, and it is controversial. And basically what we tried to do was come up with something that balanced, what we wanted to achieve, and also recognize that many of our HDFC co-ops that have been private for now many years are doing really, really well. However, that small subset that is not doing well, really stands out, owes a lot of money in municipal arrears, has very little oversight by HPD, and I'll talk a little bit about why that is. However, it's something that we feel needs to be addressed. It's something we feel that, you know, we have not had the tools to kind of take the steps that we needed to intervene when necessary. And this is our real effort, concerted effort to get to that. Again, many people had a lot of information to submit to try to get to this balance, and I really appreciate many of the advocates in this room for their input. Let me just say, first of all, very much thanks to the borough president, who has always championed the HDFCs when she was councilperson, now as borough president, so we thank you for giving us the opportunity to present. And let me just also preface and say the city council members, I know some of the city council are represented here, they have not had a chance to see this. So again, we do need to, of course, get their sign off on it because they will be instrumental in how we roll this out. So I just want to make everybody very clear that that has not yet been done and will be done over the next coming weeks. So I'll start. Everybody has a copy of the presentation. So basically, let me start with what is an HDFC co-op. I know many of you guys in the room know what it is, but just to kind of go over it, it's a cooperative formed under Article 11 of the Private Housing Finance Law, which by statute has income restrictions. The income restriction in Article 11 is really up to 165% of every median income. However, all buildings have income restrictions for incoming shareholders that are spelled out in their certificates of incorporation. Most buildings have restrictions based on the apartment's maintenance and utility payments, particularly ones that were formed, you know, more than 20 years ago. That has always been the standard. And most HDFC co-ops that were formed through HPD, the City of New York, have a tax exemption which we refer to as the DAMP cap, because these were buildings that originated from the Division of Alternative Management Programs, which is the acronym for DAMP, which basically provides a cap on the assessed value. It expires in June of 2029, so there's only 13 years left on the current cap. And again, we'll give you an example of how the cap works, what the current cap is, and how the taxes get formulated for an HDFC as opposed to typical home ownership where assessed value is what's used. They actually pay on a compressed assessed value, and the cap is $9,787 as of this fiscal year. It goes up incrementally every year, every 5 years. I think we can raise it by 6%. Is how it currently works. Again, most of these co-ops, let me go to the basics. Just to give an understanding of the portfolio, you know, this is 1,048 co-ops in HPD's portfolio comprised of 1,274 buildings. This is probably approximately 25,000 units. And I'm very clear that these are HPD's portfolio. There are more co-ops out there. These are primarily co-ops that were formed through the Tenant Interim Lease Program, the Community Management Program at HPD. As you can see, 681 buildings in Manhattan. They have the predominant number of buildings in the portfolio. However, only 207 of the co-ops have regulatory agreements to date. And this is because at HPD, we only really implemented using a regulatory agreement starting in 2003. Many buildings that have gone out the door before that do not have a regulatory agreement. Hence, we would call them 841 co-ops with no real HPD oversight in terms of having a regulatory agreement. So let's talk about some of the challenges that have been facing the HDFC co-ops. We've all seen, you know, the newspapers and some articles about high-priced sales, subletting that has been without the authorization of the board, mismanagement in buildings, financial distress. You know, 27% of the HDFC co-ops are in significant financial distress, and we define that at HPD as having more than 3,000 a DU in municipal arrears. 3,000 a dwelling unit, I'm sorry, thank you for clarification, Jordan. 3,000 a dwelling unit at HPD. So once people start to experience that type of municipal, you know, distress, sometimes they get to the point of no return. And that's what we're trying to hedge off, is to intervene earlier before they get into that type of problem. There is a lack of clarity surrounding the private housing finance law in terms of sales. And that has, I think, contributed to some of the high price sales in terms of how sales prices should be calculated and what incomes they're geared to. Particularly about the regulatory agreement, HPD has no intervention method. We don't know about the issues until it's too late. okay, and those type of buildings typically end up in third-party transfer. We recently have started round 10 of third-party transfer after probably about 3 or 4 years of not conducting a TPT action. And the HDFC co-ops constitute 37% of the current buildings in the round. And that's a very high number, and a number that we need to try to eliminate or reduce. Our current avenues to help co-ops are somewhat limited. I know everyone thinks that, as HPD, as a supervised agency, has some sort of unlimited power, but really, under Article 11, we really only have the authority to approve the formation, the dissolution, and changes to the certificate of incorporation. Without that regulatory agreement, it doesn't really give us the opportunity to intervene. So here's our changes and why we think these changes are so important to get enacted. As I said before, we've worked very close with a task force of interested stakeholders. We expect that the regulatory agreement will create more clarity for buildings around the affordability intentions of Article 11. And I know that one of the handouts was something from Strook and Strook about Article 11 and what those intentions were. With this additional information, we think we have a better ability to intervene, identify problems, and be able to bring some intervention methods before it's gone too far or become too expensive for us to fix. The agreement aims at preserving true affordability, maintaining income restrictions, while also introducing an asset restriction and cap on a sales price. So for those buildings that sign an agreement, there will be clear instructions on assets and how much that can be and what the cap on a sales price can be. And I think as many people probably have realized, as the damp cap has begun to phase out, building shareholders, when they're looking to get loans or possibly refinance, that has been a problem because, banks typically are looking for, certainty that a tax exemption's in place for at least 15 to 30 years. So we think this new agreement will go out for 40 years and give more certainty for lenders to be able to lend to the co-op or to a shareholder when needed. So let's talk a little bit about some of the provisions of the regulatory agreement. We are looking at a 40-year agreement with a tax exemption that is more generous than the current tax exemption that's in place now, which expires in 2029. So basically, we're talking about doing a deeper exemption to account for additional requirements in the regulatory agreement, and I'll talk a little bit about those moving forward. And every eligible co-op, even those with high value, when we say high value, meaning those that have high assessed value, everyone would receive a benefit, but it would be more of a sliding scale of a benefit. So the lowest value co-ops, those I believe 8,000 per DU and less, would pay no property taxes on their buildings and would be able to use those savings to be able to put back into their building, pay down delinquent tax bills, or put into reserve, because every building should have a reserve, okay, as we move forward. The other thing that we're looking at in terms of trying to improve the financial health of the co-op is that the new agreement will require a flip tax. So 30% flip tax, so when units are sold, profits, the 30% of the profits from that sale, okay, go into the building's reserve fund. So again, it can benefit the building, the shareholders, and allow the building to perform probably needed capital improvements as they move on. So some of the provisions of the regulatory agreement, this doesn't talk about each and every one, but here are some of the high-level ones. It requires routine increases to maintenance fees, okay, somewhat in line with rent stabilization, but we can talk about what those maintenance increases can be. But I think we all realize that expenses always outpace income, so we need to think about a regular annualized increase to maintenance fees. HDFCs that sign this agreement must employ the services of a third-party monitor and a third-party manager. The third-party manager's job is to help the co-op operate effectively and efficiently, and the monitor's job is to safeguard the sustainability and affordability of the building and make sure that the building is adhering to the regulatory provisions. If we deem that a building is managing itself well, and we know that many of the co-ops operate themselves well with their current boards, there is a process by which we will waive the requisite requirement to get a third-party manager. okay? But that's only if we can deem that they're managing the building well, and we will have some very clear benchmarks on what that constitutes as a building that's managing itself well. There's additional reporting to HPD and the monitor to make sure that they stay in good health, and really, most important is exercising good governance and abiding by regulatory restrictions and operating in a democratic fashion. Let's talk a little bit about the provisions of the regulatory agreement and the income and the sales restrictions. So, eligibility for becoming a shareholder in an HDFC. The household income has to be at or below 120% of AMI. Okay, that number might be a little off, 108,750, might be 108,720, okay, but we will confirm that number very easily. Might just be a typo. One of the new provisions is putting in a household asset cap. That is something that has not been in place before, and we are putting in that there's an asset cap, that you can't have assets that are above 175% of AMI, which is about 158,550, 175% of AMI. Household must make the HDFC unit its primary residence. Okay, shareholders can sublet, okay, but they have to obtain the board and the monitor's approval. Okay, and we have a very strict time frame on how long they can sublet for. Shareholders cannot own property within 100 miles of New York City. And the reason we put this in place was because, again, it's supposed to be the primary residence, and the idea that if you have a property that's so close, it gives the illusion that you do not live there, and you're not going to use that as your primary residence. The sales of the unit should be at affordable to 110% of AMI or below. So while the pricing is at 120, okay, the household income caps, who's eligible for the unit is 120, the price will be at 110% or below. Oh, let me just also add, additional primary residence requirements, sleeping in the unit for at least 270 nights a year. Okay, so again, we realize that people have to be, someplace else, but 270 nights a year, you gotta file taxes at that address, register to vote at that address. We do have provisions, of course, for those who are on military duty, okay? But, what we're trying to do is minimize the people who live elsewhere and commute to New York City while subletting their unit. And we see a lot of that happening. So, I'm gonna conclude and say, again, preserving affordable housing is critical to the mayor's housing plan. We want to be proactive and help preserving this stock. We think the regulatory agreement is a very great and needed tool and is instrumental to achieving this goal. The agreement creates insight into how buildings are performing in terms of reporting to us and letting us know that they're performing well. But more importantly, it helps us see where there's a struggle, where there's some issues, and how we can get involved and intervene before it becomes a point of no return and it becomes third-party transfer. We do not support third-party transfer having co-ops in there. We think we should be able to figure out a way to keep them out of there, but that can only be done, with cooperation, okay, and communication. So this, again, this agreement is critical, we think. We don't want to take buildings in REM, okay? That's not what in REM should be for distressed properties and not for co-ops. If, again, we communicate well, I think we can work things out. We have a lot of loan programs at HPD and tools to keep affordability, and we want to be, someone that people can rely on, look at, and we think this regulatory agreement is a tool that will enable us to do so. So with that, I will conclude. I know that I'm sure there's a lot of questions, so let me open up the floor. Some questions that anyone has in terms of the presentation.
And if people have come in who didn't introduce themselves earlier, we have the wonderful council member Mark Levine. Are there others who didn't introduce themselves who came in later? Anybody else?
I'm John Patrick, I'm Councilmember Rosenthal's office.
Okay, anybody else? Yeah, go ahead. Okay.
Ed Hartzog, co-chair of Housing Committee.
Great, anybody else?
Councilmember Garodnick's office, Corey Epstein.
Great.
So just to give you a sense of how the discussion will proceed, the membership of the Borough Board is constituted by council members and community board chairs. And if community board chairs are not here and they sent a rep, and sitting around the table, then the rep could speak. Okay? And if there's community board members here that want their chairs to raise issues on their behalf, they're more than free to give them to write a question for them on a paper. Councilmember Mark Levine?
Sure, thank you. It's great to see you, Commissioner. Thank you for being here for your presentation. Thanks, Borough President, for organizing this important discussion. Look, the HDFC movement is so large and diverse, as you well know, and you described some of the diversity. We have, unfortunately, buildings which are really struggling, which are in danger of crashing out of the program. But we have a much larger number, thankfully, that are really thriving. And that have been vehicles for residents to have a lifetime of affordable housing and even enter the middle class. And I think that we probably have to treat different segments of this sector differently. At the lower end, you say it's 27%. These are buildings which are hurting financially, physically, governance crisis. We see them all the time in my office. And clearly we have to do something to shore them up, because if they crash out, then it's a loss for those families, but also for the city. If we lose that affordable home ownership stock forever, and we don't want that to happen. At the other end, we do have units selling for $1 million or more, which doesn't meet anyone's definition of affordability. We have to do something to rein that in. But in the middle, there are hundreds and hundreds of buildings which are playing by the rules, and where people have put in so much sweat equity over the years. They've turned around their blocks, they've turned around their neighborhoods, and I want to make sure we don't unintentionally harm those buildings or harm those shareholders who have, again, played by the rules. And I'm still processing your proposal, and I learned some new things today. I have a lot of questions, but I am concerned about the potential for undue burdens on those co-ops which are playing by the rules. So, could you explain two things: the role of the monitor, and how you prevent cases where people's equity could evaporate in some way, and that even could put them into underwater mortgages and have other unfortunate consequences.
Well, the monitor is going to be there, again, to ensure that when units are sold, they're sold to income eligible residents at the appropriate prices that are spelled out in the regulatory agreement. Now, we all know that there have been people who have come in who have bought at higher prices, okay? And the idea, at least from a legal standpoint, is we're not looking to take people's equity away, and we've thought about with the advocates a way to kind of carve out people who kind of have bought at high prices, who, again, it could be a takings argument that we're prohibiting them on equity. But the monitor, again, back to that point, is we need somebody to really have that oversight and be that additional layer, okay, to really, again, ensure that the right people are getting the units, the right income eligible people at the right prices. That's primarily the monitor's role here.
Who would the monitor be?
The monitor would be a third party, okay? We are looking at issuing a request for qualifications to identify monitors. Right now, for example, from what I know, the monitors that have been used have been primarily not-for-profits. I know you have, it's been a monitor in some buildings. Clinton Housing is a monitor in some of the HDFCs. But the idea is to try to identify a pre-qualified list of third-party monitors.
And on the equity front, you said you want provisions in there to prevent people's equity being reduced, and how would that work?
Yeah, there's a carve-out provision that what we were talking about, where, again, no more than a third of the building should be able to carve out, okay, but we're talking about people who, again, the trust fund babies, right, who are income eligible, who bought for very high prices. To now have the income restriction on them, they may feel like, well, wait a minute, you're compressing our equity, our ability to get back what we paid on the apartment. So what we devised with the advocates and with the Attorney General's office is a way to kind of, what we call, carve out those units where they would not be subject to some of the same income restrictions that the rest of the co-op shareholders would be.
All right, more questions, maybe I'll come back on another round and let other people weigh in. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. Other questions?
Sure. So thank you, Commissioner. I actually want to follow up on the council members' questions in a moment, but I was hoping that you could talk quickly for a second about the routine maintenance increases. I understand this is part of your co-op program, but just sort of you could explain how, as a policy, the department sort of distinguishes that from the zeros and the other numbers we're seeing sort of for rent increases at the RGB, and how we would calculate what those maintenance increases would be to account for, times where we are seeing lesser increases in operating expenses versus income.
Right. Well, I have to tell you, I've actually been very surprised at seeing those 0% increases, for the last few years, which, again, that's the board's decision. We feel, I really have felt more so that we have seen that most co-ops have not been increasing their maintenance, Some of the maintenance levels are the same maintenance levels that we have seen when they went out the door 20 years from the city of New York. And it's just not sustainable with the expenses, of a building that or they've been renting out units at very high prices as opposed to increasing maintenance on the individual shareholders. So we really think that, we're looking for financial audits to be submitted every year, and taking that into account. Look, if there's enough income and there's enough reserves where a maintenance increase is not needed, we can look at that.
Sorry, just to clarify, so the maintenance increase would be tailored to each co-op, or there would be an across-the-board maintenance level increase in the regulatory agreement?
Well, ideally, I think we would want to see it mirror whatever rent stabilization came across. So I know this year, for example, I think there's a 2% on a 2-year lease, if I'm not mistaken. So we would look for at least a 2% or 3%. I think we would try to give some sort of floor for it. And again, if somebody said, you know what, we think that our particular co-op, based on the financial audits, doesn't warrant that, doesn't need that, because we have enough reserves, we could decide not to implement it in. I think it would be case by case. We would look for across the board, but people would have to make the case that it's not needed based on the financial audits.
And they would make that case to the department or to the third-party manager?
They would make the case to the third party, to the manager, to the manager to show my financial audits, because all those things are being done kind of collectively, that this is not warranted. We, as a tenant association board, feel that we don't need to impose one, because again, the financial audits indicate that we have enough cash on hand.
Sure, and then just briefly to sort of piggyback on what Councilmember Levine asked, how will the initial price ceilings be set for units?
The initial price ceilings would be set at the 110% of AMI. There will be a sales chart that will be in the regulatory agreement. It will be indexed annually every year. So it will have the prices spelled out by unit size in the actual agreement.
Okay. And how will unit size be determined for the initial offer?
Unit size,
given
studio
that.
Ones, two, what do you mean?
Well, yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying, but what methodology will you use to assess was a Studio One, what they were at the initial point of entering the HGFC program?
Yeah.
Or what I'm saying, the number of units, my understanding. I'm an HGFC shareholder, for instance, right? A number of units have been converted in various ways since they initially entered the program. And I guess the hope, I would just say, this would sort of be a comment, that an individual sort of assessment will be done by the third-party manager with the department and the board to establish sort of the unit composition, and there'd be sort of a process for, not necessarily arbitration, for discussion about whether, if someone felt that their unit that may have been classified as a studio when they entered the program in which we got the dam, if they purchased at a different size, right? Because you're talking about doing this carve-out for people that might be high income, at a high purchase price, but you also could see someone lose their equity if they purchased an apartment as a one-bedroom, that because at the time of entering the program as a studio, they're going to lose equity that way.
Okay, I think I hear you. I understand your point now. If there have been unit configurations, like you said, I think there has to be consensus, and I think we should spell that out in the regulatory agreement. So that's between the manager and the shareholders. Everyone should agree. We have 5 studios and 1A, 1B, and so forth.
Right.
Because again, I'm not in a position. I just know what it was when it went out of city ownership. Okay, I'm not in a position to say I know it's a 2-bedroom. So I think I would let the board and I would let the manager kind of make that determination on what the unit sizes are attributable to each apartment.
Right. I appreciate that. It's sort of in the one sort of last comment I'll make before turning back over. I think sort of in that spirit is that I think it's very important for, though I understand the need for some uniformity, for us to be very cognizant of the need to, in a lot of these areas, tailor various pieces to things like unit composition, like the need for carve outs, like exactly whether or not someone really would need the maintenance increase in creating provisions for there be those exemptions and some of the other exemptions that you noted about whether or not someone actually needs a third-party manager if they are a well-managed co-op.
Yep. These are individual regulatory agreements, so each one will have its own kind of set of circumstances.
Thank you for the set of questions. Other questions, yes?
Quickly, there's a flip tax of 30%, which implies that there's been appreciation of equity. You're eligible at 120%, but resale is at 110% of AMI, so that would indicate that there might be people coming in that could afford only a lower price. There's a 30% flip tax, which implies that there's been a large increase of equity. What happens if the market goes down, or the people who can afford the apartment can't afford it after 30% flip?
Wait, so the seller is not getting the full amount of the profit. They're putting back a 30% flip tax to the HDFC.
Right.
So you're saying they're not selling it at a price that allows for a 30% flip tax to be given back to the co-op in terms of what equity they would then take from the sale?
I'm more worried about a new person coming in, right, at 110%, right? So they're coming in able to afford a lower price.
Right.
And now the person the apartment that's becoming available is maybe from somebody who was able to afford a slightly higher price and now 30% lower. They have to sell it, 30%.
Well, again,
can the 110% that we want to put into that unit?
Right, it's 30% of the profits, okay? The profits, okay? Not the sale price, right? 30% of the sale profits are what go back in. Okay? And again, people have to understand that when they are buying in, the whole idea for us putting this in is we don't want people to, people usually are long-term shareholders, not coming in, not looking for people to flip, okay? And if you come in and if you want to flip very quickly, we expect a higher flip tax to, in terms, so you should get less of a profit from it. The idea is long-term stewardship.
Just to add to that, does that include capital improvements?
It does not. It include, I believe we took out fees, sellers' fees, okay, and things like that, but it did not improve capital improvements.
If I could just follow up with that, a lot of the HDFCs and people who came in spent a lot of time and sweat equity and risk to fix up these buildings. Is there a reason why the amount of money it took them to even get the C of O is not being included?
I think the problem, Tina, for us is how do you evaluate that? And I think we will get into trouble, okay, and have challenges on what the valuation of those capital improvements is, okay, and that's something that we're not prepared to deal with, okay, and it will become very subjective. Okay, if you say, well, I did this much work and my unit now is worth $100,000 more, and the board says, well, no, I don't think those improvements were that much, and it's only worth $40,000. Where do we end up at the end of the day? I think it will lead to challenges and issues, and that was something that we did not think needed to be added in there.
But I would venture to say that sidestepping such an extremely important issue, especially for low-income people, would be quite devastating to them if they needed to move to take care of parents and so forth and so on. I think if we're going to institute regulations not addressing vital concerns is problematic just because we can't figure out how to do it. I think there are ways where I think we're smart enough to do it. Otherwise, I would say don't include it if it's going to be damaging to the current people living there.
Okay, well, what I would welcome then is tell me how you believe we should evaluate that and how we would be able to make it something fair, okay, that no one would challenge. So again, I hear your thought. It's something that we did not want to look at. We'll take another look at that.
Okay.
Sorry, Commissioner, I could just make one.
For the purposes of, this is being live streamed through the internet, we do have viewers, so for the purposes of the viewers through the internet in the public meeting, please state your name, the community board that you're a chair of, or the council member that you're representing. And also, we've been joined by Council Member Rosie Mendez, which at any point which you'd like to. Okay, thank you. So remember, the community board you chair, the council member you represent.
April Tyler, and I'm not the chair, but I'm representing the chair of Community Board 9, and I'm the co-chair of the Housing, Land Use, and Zoning Committee, and an HDFC shareholder. I have a couple of questions. One, you stated that this proposed regulatory agreement, and let's keep stating that proposed regulatory agreement, was developed by a task force in HDFC. And you then stated you're going to roll it out to the council members, but where are the shareholders of HDFCs included in this? When we met with you, you said that you were going to do extensive outreach to shareholders to get shareholder input. Where is that in your timetable, number one? Then second.
Wait, don't do me numerous quick.
Okay,
I'll be like,
sure.
what's the first one?
That's
So let me
fair.
get number one. We still stand by, we will be talking to shareholders, okay? I just wanted just to be, very, very candid and say, council members who, we need their support as well, right? Because the idea is that we're talking about revoking the current tax exemption and giving a deeper one. That is something that the council needs to support, and I have not had an opportunity, as Councilmember Levine said, he has a lot of questions still. I'm sure Councilmember Mendez has. We haven't spoken to them yet. We plan on meeting with them shortly. So in the rollout process, there are a number of parties that need to be educated, talked to, have the opportunity to give feedback, and the shareholders are definitely part of that population.
Okay. So let me then go to the damp tax abatement and the 2029 sunset. Where is the precedent for an existing benefit being extinguished or the sunsetting of it being accelerated? And then what is the mechanism for doing that if the intention is to sunset that damp exemption earlier?
Okay. Well, again, just so you understand, at HPD, we change tax exemptions all the time, okay? We make them deeper, we change them. But what I'm saying here is we would need city council approval, okay, to extinguish the current tax exemption and issue a new one. And that's why I prefaced by saying that we hadn't spoken to the city council yet, but we would need their support, and they would be able to do that by a resolution, okay, and replace the exact tax exemption.
Can I just piggyback on that? Are you asking for approval from the council, and you're gonna do that building by building, or you're gonna do that for all damp tax together at one fell swoop?
We're gonna look to do an omnibus resolution, Councilman, okay, something that includes every building. So basically, it will have the same language, and it'll have an attachment that lists all of the buildings that would be applicable for.
Okay, so then if you're planning to do an omnibus resolution, then the next question was, is this going to be a mandatory regulatory agreement for all HDFCs, or will it be voluntary as it is currently? And then if there's an omnibus resolution which eliminates the tax exemption, then it becomes coercive.
Well, again, we feel like we have to, again, when I tried to ask people to do a regulatory agreement years ago, many people did not choose to do so. We feel now that it's something that we need to have in place. And the way that we believe we can achieve that is by eliminating the tax exemption, okay? And people will have the opportunity to come in. It's not mandatory. You can decide to pay taxes. Some co-ops pay taxes all the time. So it's a decision that each co-op will make, whether they would like to come in, sign a regulatory agreement. We encourage them to do so they can reap the rewards of having a deeper tax exemption.
Okay, and then the second and last question. What is that deeper? Are you talking, because I know that 100% has been bandied about, something richer has been talked about. What's your thoughts about what the deeper will be?
Well, what we're looking to do is for those that have an assessed value of 8,000, a dwelling unit or less, will get a full tax exemption. It will be based on the assessed value. So those with higher assessed values will pay a little bit more. And what I can do is leave everyone with the tax exemption formulas, so you can see how we are looking at structuring it. But the idea is it's an escalating scale that's kind of just linked to the assessed value of the building. So those that are higher priced, okay, will pay some taxes, and those with low assessed values will pay nothing.
Okay, and then lastly, with respect to the carve-out, so you're saying that the trust fund babies who were income poor but asset rich, who paid higher prices because of Mrs. Johnson and Mr. Jones, who lived through the drug era, the landlord abandonment, the sweat equity, contributed their sweat equity, and held the building together and held the neighborhoods together so that they became attractive to those trust fund babies, would then be required to sell, if they desire to sell, at a much lower amount than the trust fund babies who would be carved out at this higher amount. And I think that would be patently unfair.
Well, it's, again, I use the example of the trust fund baby because I know that some of those were those who bought at very high prices, okay, because they were able to get the assets of their parents or whatever. But it really, for anybody who bought at a high price, who now is going to be troubled that now a regulatory agreement is going to impose an income restriction. And, you know, it really, it's a takings argument. We don't want people to say that, you know, oh, all of a sudden you've compressed my value in such a way that it's unfair. And we've given that up. We've been very sensitive about that and tried to think about a way that we could allow for them to be carved out of having that income exemption.
Okay, but just to highlight this point, I think that many people who, myself included, who have lived in buildings where we didn't have an elevator. I live on the 7th floor. I had to walk up the stairs for 10 years. We in many instances didn't have a boiler. We had a landlord who abandoned the building. We had to put in our money, as Tina said, in order to renovate our apartments. We put in significant equity. Our building, my building in particular, was scheduled to be demolished. We saved our building. We are now a model in our neighborhood as a good building. We are financially stable. So people are now wanting to live in our building, wanting to pay higher prices, but people who were there from the beginning now see their equity, their potential equity diminished because of these caps. And I think that is patent, like, so someone who comes in and actually puts in dollars is valued higher as someone who put in effort and equity and sweat equity. And I think that
I don't think we're trying to try to have that kind of divisiveness. Look, the sales prices I think we have in the agreement are still relatively, you know, I think at 110% AMI is still a good price, and I think represents a appreciation on what you originally bought the unit for to what you're selling the unit for now. So it's not intended to try to reward people who have not put in sweat equity. Okay, we think this. I mean, some people would like these sales prices to be lower. Okay, and you know, and again, a board can decide to make them lower if they want to choose so. We feel that 110%. This is an affordable housing program. These are for low-income tenants. We're not talking about these aren't market rate co-ops, and never were intended to be so. So even if your area has become market, and maybe you could sell for $1 million, that was not the intent of the original program. And again, you make a choice. You don't want to sign a regulatory agreement and want to do something different, it's a choice that each individual board will have to make.
Okay, and
actually, I think, because we have to give opportunities to other people. I just want to say we've been joined by Community Board 10 Chair Brian Benjamin. And remember, state which community board you're a chair of, or which community board chair has authorized for you to represent at this meeting. And if you're a council member rep, which council member you represent.
My name is Jamie Rogers, Chair of Community Board 3. So, Anne Marie, I have a question about the monitor, the monitoring process. Sure. Just to clarify, the monitor would be responsible for these, the financial audits you mentioned, as well as, would they also be responsible for, the processes by which you remove tenants who no longer, comply? I guess an eviction, for lack of a better word?
The manager, the property manager would handle eviction proceedings, right? They're the day-to-day managers, and they're the persons that are dealing with landlord-tenant issues and things like that. We see the monitor as being more the resource for making sure, again, income eligible tenants are coming into the building, okay, and at the appropriate pricing. Okay, that's where we really see the monitor's primary role to be. The property manager is the one that if a board says somebody didn't do something properly and now we need to move to evict, we believe that should be a property management exercise.
Okay, so the monitor is the gatekeeper, but then who's responsible for the ongoing oversight? Like, for instance, ensuring that that 30% flip tax goes into the reserve, that the reserve is maintained at the levels stipulated in the regulatory agreement, that all the, you know, that the tenants, you know, aren't going off and buying second homes within 100 miles of New York. Who's monitoring that?
I think some of that does relate to the monitor, because I think that they have to provide affidavits to the monitor showing that the tenant is an eligible tenant, that they don't exceed the pricing. So again, some of the things kind of overlap between the monitor and the manager. And what I can do again is get you guys a very clear, you know, delineation of monitoring responsibilities, property, and the property manager's responsibilities. Okay?
Thank you. And then, so one last note about this property restriction. It seems that it might be overbroad only in that you know, if someone, let's say someone owns a, I don't know, they along with their siblings inherit, you know, their deceased relatives, you know, house somewhere that's within 100 miles, and you know, and they and their siblings, you know, it doesn't collectively amount to an asset over 175% AMI, and they decide to rent the unit, the house to somebody. So that just that this 100-mile restriction just seems like it might, you know, catch people who aren't having second homes and, you know, wherever.
Well, I tell you, there was a lot of debate about the miles. I mean, originally we had 300 miles, okay, and our law department thought that was a bit onerous. We thought 100 miles was something, again, that represented someplace that, again, we figured like somebody had a second home, it was 300 miles away. 100 miles, we felt like that could allow for somebody to be living there, okay, which is something we did not want to encourage, because they're supposed to be using the unit as a primary resident. If they inherit something, you know, I believe we're giving an opportunity for them to sell it in a certain amount of time, okay, but the idea is that they would not hold it as an asset at that point.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman Rogers. Other questions? Councilmember Wonderman?
Sure. You talked about fear of being accused of implementing a taking if you were lowering the equity on particularly those who purchase at a higher value. But would not the application of lower AMI limits have the same effect? For example, I think many buildings have 165% of AMI income cap. I don't know how widespread that is. I've heard anecdotally about that. Wouldn't that, as a practical matter, also lower resale value?
Well, the 165% is statute, right? I mean, it's an HDFC, so
Right.
so they're not allowed to sell for more than that.
But you would lower it to 120.
120, and that's why we would have the carve out. So they would be a unit that would be carved out and not subject to that 120% cap.
But you said it would only be 30% per building, no?
Well, it can only be about a third of the, it can't be more than a third of the building, am I
But
right? Laurel?
Couldn't there be cases where the whole building is currently implementing a 165% cap? That could be a standard rule in a given co-op, right?
But, well, if they're all doing it at 165%,
Right.
okay, with no regulatory, that's fine. That's
And
statute.
they could continue to do that?
That's statute. That's just, if they didn't sign the regulatory agreement. You can't have everybody carved out. The whole building can't be a carve out.
Can I try to
Right.
clarify? The council member was asking, wouldn't it constitute a taking on everyone's property to lower the applicable AMI for purchases? That by lowering the AMIs, therefore you're lowering someone's ability to purchase, and therefore that is a taking of everyone's assets in the building.
No, well,
I mean, that's the question he's asking.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that rises to the level of a regulatory taking.
that's
But
that's loyal from the Attorney General's office. So.
Okay, well, great
He was
to
a
have
lawyer.
her input. I don't see why a price cap would constitute a taking, but lowering the AMI cap is different. I don't see the distinction. They both, as a practical matter, lead to a lower sale price, no?
Well, one, I mean, I think the regulatory agreement that Anne Marie is describing, there's an actual number for a sales price.
Right.
Right, like the AMI, there isn't necessarily a correlation between the AMI requirement and the sales price. So if you're not covered by the new regulatory agreement, there is no restriction. And if you are covered by the new regulatory agreement, then it's part of an affordable housing.
Okay, I
I mean,
still don't see why.
every affordable housing, I mean, every other affordable housing program has an AMI requirement, it's not considered.
No, I'm not contesting it to be an AMI. I'm just trying to understand this transition from 165 to 120. it's gonna affect sales price, that's the market, right, that's how it works.
You mean sales
right?
price for the units that are under the regulatory agreement or that are not?
Yeah, well, that are under the reg, but just like you're worried about the price cap under the regulatory agreement constituting a taking, I don't see why a lowered AMI cap wouldn't constitute the same threat.
So if there's a building that currently has had sales and they're all at 165,
Right.
then there wouldn't be a 30% carve out because it would be the entire building. So that building wouldn't be eligible then to sign this new regulatory agreement and have the benefit of the tax abatement.
Again, it's the.
Yes or no, I'm asking the question, I didn't formulate a question.
What-
So if there's a building
Mhm.
where you said that if there are certain units that were purchased at a higher price.
Right.
Those units would be carved out up to a certain point, 30%. So if a building has had, say, a 50% turnover, what happens to the additional 20% of buildings, of units that have sold at higher prices? If there's a cap, or is there no cap? If there's an entire turnover, is there a 100% carve out, or are they just not eligible to sign this regulatory agreement and therefore have the benefit of the tax abatement?
So I think my impression of sort of where this is in the process is that that's a question of sort of like the type of carve out that is gonna ultimately be on the table. And I don't think, HPD can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think that that's entirely determined, right? Because that is a tricky situation, right? It's easier if you have a 100-unit building and there's 10 units that had a high price sales, that carve out is easy, it doesn't trigger the sort of 30% issue. But if you have a building where there's been way more, then I think that's more complicated, and I think the way that will be dealt with will be determined by the structure of the carve out that HPD ultimately ends up deciding on.
I also want to just clarify for the councilman, to make the distinction between the 165 is the income limit of the purchaser that we're now saying would be 120. That does not impact the sales price per se, because we've seen units that even at 165 are trading at much higher
Well,
levels.
you've got an asset cap.
But you have an asset cap.
If they're carved out, they won't have an asset cap.
Right, that's
If
right.
you're carved out, you will not have an asset
Right.
cap.
Right.
So the $20 million units can sell for $3 million. Because they won't have an
If there's
asset
20
cap.
million units, but there's no, again, if they're carved out from the income restriction and the asset cap as
Right.
well.
Community Board 11 Chair, Diane Conley.
Thank you. I want to take the conversation in a different direction, because I think many of my constituents look at going into this program as an affordable investment for what is considered generational wealth building. That's the way they're looking at it. And I don't know about everybody else at the table, but that's the bottom line. And so many of them get involved, and some of them are still in what I call the TIL program. Does this address people who are what I call in purgatory? They're still TIL, but they're not HDFC.
I'm
being real.
I'm sorry,
Purgatory.
this regulatory agreement is only for the housing development fund corporations that are co-ops now.
existing,
The
correct.
TIL program, again, we're getting them out of purgatory soon, okay, and moving them to the Affordable Neighborhood Co-op Program pipeline, okay, where they will have a regulatory agreement. There will be some differences to this regulatory agreement because the TIL and the ANC pipeline will have debt. Those buildings will have some HPD subsidy, but they will also have bank debt.
Right.
So they won't have the same sales price caps, okay? They'll have different sales price issues that they will use based on the financing of the building.
Okay, so this doesn't apply to them, and correct me, Benjamin, for CB10 as well as CB11, we have a lot more TIL type of issues in our community, so that's important for us to understand where you're heading with that. And the thing that,
I will jump in and just say that as for a property manager and a monitor, like some of the requirements that we're putting here, that will apply to the TIL and the ACP buildings. We are looking for those buildings to go out the door with private managers, okay, third-party managers, and a monitor will also be used. So there are some similarities, but everything is not apples to apples.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
So that's another discussion presentation we'll have at a future date.
Yeah.
But I just want to make a comment also, not just as it applied to TIL, and you've kind of touched on it. one of the biggest issues that I have found in listening to people in the community about either TIL or HDFC is the lack of financial training they have. They're just thrown right in the middle of this, and they are to become what I consider very astute at addressing whatever the issues are, amortizations, basically what, bidding for boilers, whatever it takes. And as a result, they become stressed, as you call it, financial stress. So is there a plan in place for, not just in this regulatory agreement, for the people themselves, financial training, and guess what, estate planning? Because that becomes very important. And I just would like to take into consideration, because that does impact, one, the prices, that does impact how they handle. They'll go directly to a loan rather than trying to work it out financially within the maintenance.
I totally understand what you're saying, and again, we've always trained our tenants and our shareholders. We will continue to do so. And we will continue to do ongoing training. And I think what we're trying to get at is by putting in a property property management is hard. It's hard working all day and coming home and managing your building. It's hard keeping up with the local laws when they change every year and different things. And that's the idea of why we want to put in a property manager, okay, someone who's a professional, who that's their job, okay, to do, and they have expertise. At the same time, though, we want to make sure our tenants are trained properly, that they know how to mind their manager.
Yes.
Okay, and make sure that their manager's not doing something that is not in the best interest of them.
Right.
So we promise and continue to keep the pledge to train, and retrain, okay? And we want to train everybody in the building, not just the current board, because boards change over time, okay? And that's something I think we've always struggled with, is that there's always been that group of dynamic leaders who've kind of taken the helm and have never relinquished it. And a lot of the other shareholders kind of sit somewhat passive and don't get involved. And we want to change that mindset, that everybody should be involved, everybody should understand, because they may have to run their board and have to do some of the same things you talked about in terms of financial acumen and making sure you know how to manage your building well. That's good.
Okay, 2 more questions for the Deputy Commissioner.
I have one question.
Yeah, two more council members of community board chairs.
Should I go now? Okay. I'm sorry I got here a little late, traffic, but I'm going through your presentation and I'm looking at this and it says that only 200 and so if you repeated this, you know what, I'll go back and make an appointment so I don't take up everybody's time here. But if I haven't, if this is a new question, then it might be good for everybody to hear. So it says here there's only 207 co-ops with regulatory agreement. So how is it that some have regulatory agreements and some don't?
Councilmember, we only instituted using a regulatory agreement at the HPD in 2003.
You started in 2003.
Right, so any co-ops that were sold prior to 2003 were not required to sign a regulatory agreement. Now, if a co-op comes back into HPD now for a loan, for a low-interest loan for work, they are required to sign a regulatory agreement.
Would there be a possibility that the buildings might have a regulatory agreement somehow? No?
Well, again, if they don't have it with
Not the
HPD.
agency.
Right, and again, the only one that would have a regulatory agreement probably with HPD or HCR, but we believe that if they don't have one with HPD, they don't have one with anybody. And it would be recorded. A regulatory agreement is always recorded. So we don't believe that these buildings have HPD regulatory agreements for sure, but we know we didn't execute them.
If they're part of a land trust, would the land trust have it?
Again, if they're
or-
part of a land trust as a co-op, they may have an underlying regulatory agreement. Many of these co-ops that we were talking about here, Councilmember, were sold from TIL and the community management program and weren't part of land trusts per se.
I see. So my next question I think just got answered. It says 841 co-ops have no HPD oversight, and that's because they have no regulatory agreement.
Right.
And the ones that do all came in through TIL, and you instituted that before you did the sale.
Right, exactly. They signed a regulatory agreement at the closing, yes.
Okay. On your third little face there, chart, it says financial distress. 27% of HPD co-ops are in significant financial distress. What is the reason for the financial distress? That they're not able to pay their taxes are increasing? Is it that they're not raising their maintenance and now they're having big problems and they didn't have a reserve? So
You answered all of that. all of the things you said are true.
Is it one more than the other?
Well, again, what I get concerned about, particularly on financial distress, I think you weren't here when we talked about it being more than 3,000 a dwelling unit, okay, in municipal arrears, okay? It's a combination usually of taxes and the other distressing piece is DEP, water. We all know water, okay, never goes away. Okay, taxes we can deal with for an HDFC, water we cannot. So we have seen in TPT round 10, for example, we have seen a number of the buildings have inordinate water debt as well.
So that was my other question. 37% of these buildings are in TPT. They were HDFC co-ops that were mismanaged or find themselves in arrears and then ended up in TPT?
Yes, these are, right now we ran the current round of third-party transfer, which is still ongoing, okay? So what we're saying here is 30% of all the buildings that are still in round 10 are co-ops, okay? They still have opportunities to go into payment plans. They still have opportunity to pay the debt and to be severed from third-party transfer. So there still are some opportunities, but again, as time goes on, the opportunities become less and less. If they go through third-party transfer, they will no longer be co-ops. They will come back out as affordable rental buildings.
The next box says, and I just want to hear you say it, there will be caps on sales prices. Is that correct?
Yes.
And how will you determine what the cap will be?
We actually have a chart that will define sales prices to be affordable at 110% of area median income.
So there won't be any change in sale prices depending on the units in a building? Like my building is a 7-unit building. And on my block, most of them are like from 7 to 20 units, but there are some buildings that are 30 units. So how many units in a building is not gonna factor into that?
No, and again, and Jordan is in my ear and making a very good point that 110% AMI is our.
Get out of her ear.
You
can talk into her ear, but don't get it.
It's a good one, it's a good one. That's the ceiling. A board may decide that they want to do lower sales prices, right, at 100% AMI, 80% AMI, okay? We're gonna leave that up to them to make that determination.
I thought we had a regulatory agreement, maybe we don't, in my building. But I know that when I came into my building, we also had agreements that if we're ever gonna sell, I have to sell back to my board. They reimburse me whatever I paid for the shares plus any interest, and that's it. And then they sell to the next person for whatever the amount is for the shares, and so that way we keep it affordable. So we all signed that agreement going in.
Councilmember, that's great. I mean, that sounds to me more akin to what Michelama co-ops are, where basically you're not really getting a big appreciation on equity, but the idea is to keep it affordable and keep, people in the community from buying it. That sounds absolutely fabulous. People can, look, again, we're trying to put out some parameters here, and again, some of these are ceilings, right? People, if you want to do something different, because you know what, you have something that talks about long-term stewardship and making sure family members can get them at affordable prices, we are open to looking at all of those avenues. Affordability is first and foremost our goal here.
How many buildings are currently still receiving dam taxes?
Oh, I probably, all of these probably still are getting some form of the cap.
The 800 and something, or the 1,000?
No, the 1,000, yeah, probably most of them have some sort of damp cap in place.
I'll ask you about flip tax at another point. Here you're saying routine increases to maintenance. What are you thinking is routine, or that's to be determined?
Well, we were thinking annual maintenance increases, and gentleman here was talking about, well, would there be an opportunity for someone to say they didn't need the maintenance increase because the financials are in good shape and the building has reserves, and I said that was something we would be willing to look at.
Okay. My last question for now, I think, is the problem that you and I tackle every day, these tenant board run controlled rental HDFCs. They look like a co-op, they act like a co-op, but they're not a co-op. They're all financial messes. What are we gonna do with those? Are there gonna be any plans to try to make them HDFC co-ops? And then that way we can get control over them. They're subject to rent stabilization. There's no way they're ever gonna get enough money to manage the building, particularly when the damp tax is running out, or if they had a J51 that already ran out. And then actually there's another question I'm gonna throw in there. I'm not quite, you mentioned carve out. I'm not quite sure what you meant by that, but apparently it was discussed earlier, so I wanna know what that is, but you can tell me that offline, I guess.
Yeah, and I think the challenge you were talking about with this, the ones that look and act like co-ops, I think we need to think of some different intervention methods for those. I don't think it makes sense to make them co-ops, okay? If they can't work as rentals, okay, and they fight amongst each other now, making them a co-op, I think would just exacerbate the situation. I think we need to think about what other intervention methods there are, possibly maybe, I was actually thinking the other night about.
But the problem there has been
Uh-huh.
that their rent roll is so low. Now granted, there's a couple that are doing crap like lowering their rents. But if they were instituting, and some of them are, instituting the rent stabilized rent increases, it's still not enough in a 6-unit building to cover everything, particularly when their J51 ran out. Or, they can't cover all their taxes.
Right.
So how many of these creatures are there? They happen to be all in my district? And how many are there in the city? And, because I think making them co-ops will force some of them to raise their maintenance, which hence will infuse them with a little bit more money to do something, but
Well, I think, we should talk offline about that, because I think I have some different ways of dealing with them where you can restructure rents, okay? HPD has rent restructuring authority when we do work in the building, and what I think we should look at is whether some of these buildings can benefit from getting some work done where we can restructure rents to make sure that the rents actually cover the expenses.
when you restructure rent, can you deal with the commercial rents as well?
Again, it depends on if there are leases in place. Okay, we have to see, because if there's a long-term lease, I'm not quite sure what, we may need an attorney to think about how we would break a lease, okay, in terms of doing something with the commercial. Typically, when HPD restructures, it is residential rents, not commercial rents. Okay.
Thank you. The Speaker's Office?
Hi, I'm Rebecca Cribbin from the Speaker's Office.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how's it going?
Okay.
So a lot of people here seem to have concerns about kind of making sure that people's price caps on apartments aren't being limited, or kind of looking at it from a limitation standpoint. But, I think that there's also a huge concern about what happens. This is an affordable housing program. And this was something that was once upon a time affordable to low and moderate income people. And we're not talking about that today, and we don't seem to be talking about that anymore. So my question is, what's happening if we have 120%, which granted is lower than some HDFCs at 165% of AMI, there's a lot of incentive then to only bring in people who are at or close to 120% of AMI, because from the board's perspective, you kind of look financially irresponsible if you keep picking people who are lower income, maybe their credit isn't as strong, and we kind of lose that ability to provide housing to people who can't afford co-ops on the market, hence why they're looking at HDFC co-ops. So what's the, how do we combat that? I understand boards will have the ability to make this decision on either an individual building or co-op basis, but it really seems like there's a strong incentive to push incomes up rather than look at moderate income people and think about options for them.
Well, again, I think when we started to say, right now, the regulatory agreements we have in place right now allow people to sell to folks at 120% of AMI. We try to balance that by putting prices at 110%. They can be lower. We encourage people to do them lower, okay? But again, I gotta give people some incentive for wanting to do this, okay, to come into the regulatory agreement. I'm asking you now to put additional expenses in place with a monitor, okay, with a property manager. So it's a delicate balance. I am totally with you about it's an affordable housing program. That's why I'm not trying to talk about prices that should be at 165 or anything like that. We've always at HPD talked about our home ownership programs for low and moderate to be between 80 and 120% AMI. So we're just being consistent with how other home ownership programs operate, and the fact that we're asking the people to pay some portion of taxes, that's also something that we think is inherent to home ownership.
And then additionally on those price caps, so I kind of caught a glimpse of them, but maybe I think it would be helpful to give an example of, you know, like year one, what the prices are, because to me, they seem extraordinarily high, and they also seem like, you know, obviously it's whatever the market will bear, whatever someone is willing to buy it for, but it, you know, if buildings are thinking, well, every single time we're gonna want that maximum sales price, those prices are pretty high.
Yeah, well, again, they don't, again, I don't think it's not financially astute of them to have at a lower price or anything like that. I'm sorry, year one, I think I have my chart. Currently at year one, I got it, a studio would be at, now would be at $286,296, a one bedroom at $347,636, and a two bedroom at $412,000.
It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. Again, we have to have some incentives for people to do it. They can do it now, okay? They can do it now, all right? They can adopt something that's lower. We are more than happy to design a chart for anyone that's lower. But for me to think that somebody's gonna now say, I can do it, I can sell it 120, and I'm gonna now be compressed to 60 or 80, I'm not sure if I'm gonna be able to incentivize people to wanna come in to a regulatory agreement that's asking for some of these things and have their prices compressed in that way. So it's a balance, it really is. And I'm with you 100% that this is an affordable housing program. We're not trying to have windfalls here. That's why we put in flip tax as well, right? So that you don't get all the profits from the sale. It's intended that we want people to be long-term stewards of the unit.
Last two comments? And then I have you.
Hi, Eric Stern, Land Use Chair for Community Board. Hi, thank you so much for coming this morning. You spoke about a 40-year-long regulatory agreement, and I'm wondering, with some discussions about really long-term affordability or permanent affordability, what thought HPD and the city might have about either a longer regulatory period. I understand there may be a concern over how long the city can grant a tax exemption for, but whether there might be some thought given to an option, let's say, for the city to extend the terms of that regulatory agreement, conditional upon the grant of similar tax exemption, at year 40. Thinking, trying to think about 40 years seems like a long time from now, but 40 years does come.
Right.
And thinking about creating a long, stock of, permanent, affordable housing.
Well, I think to your point, the regulatory agreement will run coterminous with the tax exemption. So it's a 40-year regulatory agreement, 40-year tax exemption. And I think you're right. I think we would hope that in 40 years, people will have more capital needs, would want to come back into us. We would re-up the regulatory agreement for another 40 years. We can't give a tax exemption, I think, for more than 60 years by law right now. So again, the idea in all of our programs at HPD is that we will have people at the end of that term come back to us for additional capital needs, and at that time we can re-up the regulatory agreement and extend out affordability even further.
Yeah, and I guess just a very quick follow-up. I guess one of the concerns is a part of the city right now that may not, where the potential sale price for co-op may not seem that high. 40 years from now could be one there where the upside of getting some additional subsidy may not outweigh the potential upside of going to market, and so I would just urge you guys maybe to think about ways of maybe structuring an option in that regulatory agreement.
Okay. That's my Mitchell-Lama program. That's my problem right now.
Yeah.
So I definitely hear you, and we'll think about that.
Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Anne-Marie, for coming.
Hey,
I
Brian.
apologize for being late.
No problem.
But I wanted to talk a little bit about the HPD monitor and the property manager, because I feel like the devil is always in the details with some of these things. Who picks, and I apologize if you said this already, but who picks the property manager? What's the role of the HPD monitor in that process? And I see something here about a waiver, there could be a potential waiver. What are there going to be clear guidelines as to what can determine a HDFC having a waiver on the property manager? So maybe you can give me a little sense of that.
Sure. This, I did say earlier, but the way we are looking at trying to give people a short list of approved third-party monitors and property managers is we plan to issue our request for qualifications and get a pre-qualified list that they can choose from. Granted, they can choose somebody else who's not on the list, but we would want them to go through our qualification process to ensure that they're appropriate and they're responsible and they can do the job.
And your intentions for the HPD monitor to be involved in perpetuity, at least for the 40-year agreement?
We want the monitor would stay in place for the term of the regulatory agreement.
Okay.
Commissioner, when will you release the full document?
When will we release, I'm sorry?
The full, your proposal for the
proposal.
regulatory.
Well, some people have seen the regulatory agreement, you've seen the draft.
No, I mean for the public and for shareholders,
Oh.
so that we can actually comment not on a PowerPoint, but
Uh-huh.
on the actual document.
What we were planning to do was to do, as we do the rollout and start talking to shareholders, was a summary of all of the salient points of the regulatory agreement, and also have a frequently asked question, kind of, thing on our website. So we do plan to release it. Look, the regulatory agreement, we're not, look, and let me just be clear, I can't negotiate a regulatory agreement with 25,000 individual shareholders. So we will do some summaries, okay, that have some of the salient points of the regulatory agreement, which we will allow the shareholders to look at and have comments and talk back and forth, and we'll have our dialogue.
Are you willing to negotiate the regulatory agreement with the council, though?
I'm not, well, again, let me just be clear. I need the council's support, okay, for the resolution. Okay, so negotiating, again, this is an HPD legal document. We don't typically negotiate legal documents with anyone, okay?
So you want us to revoke the dam?
Wait,
No, I just want to be very clear.
Let me be clear. We want you to have feedback on it, okay, and give us your comments, okay, which we will take into consideration and see where we will make any sort of changes. But I definitely want the council to be supportive of a regulatory agreement that we want to give to your constituents.
We want something that we agree with also, but let me just say this. We, as community board and members of community boards, we remember the ZQA and MIH. We got a PowerPoint presentation. We got frequently asked questions. When we actually looked at the documents, it was very different. And there were many, many more details that were not included in those FAQs and the PowerPoints. So we would like transparency, the actual documents that the public can look at and comment on, so that the council members know our perspective as those who live in the buildings, so that they know those, and you know our perspectives on the actual documents, not the watered down versions.
Understood.
And so thank you.
In terms of to add to your list of requests that in terms of follow-up, we also have a list of the dam buildings.
When are we gonna know which are the damp buildings in our district? When are the community boards?
I'll send that to you.
Yeah, we can give you that very easily.
Can you send it to
Now, yeah, well,
And Jordan, we help identify
I'd like to
buildings
thank,
with
I'd like to thank the
regulatory
Deputy
agreements.
Commissioner HPD for the presentation.
Thank
And
you.
I know we gave us a lot of time,
Thank
but I know many of you are also here for low-income immigrants, the health indicators for low-income immigrants, which is our next presentation. And those of you who have to leave, we don't think you're against low-income immigrants, but we know that this is the next presentation that's very important. So if we do that presentation from the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, do you have a PowerPoint or?
And just know, everybody's gonna have to read it and see it before they can sign it, so, right? I'm not about cheese.
Morris, do you have
Aggressive and fierce.
Okay, everyone, can you take your seats again? We're going to continue the Borough Board so we can get out of here in a timely manner. Please, community board chairs, MBPO staff, if you can have everyone go out, if they have to go out, stay if they're going to stay. Jessica, can you close? Jessica, can you close the door? Can you close the door?
If you are staying, please take a seat so we can continue the meeting.
That's our board over there. Everyone, we're gonna continue now. Please be seated. We have the Deputy Director, the New York City Health Department. Okay, everyone, we must continue.
Please be seated. Please be seated.
Councilmember Reps, there's room around the table now. Councilmember Reps, there's room around the table. Community board chairs.
Yeah. CB chairs, Councilmember Rep, please be seated.
Sorry about the transition.
Yeah.
We turn now to Deputy Director Ricci from the Department of Health on health action indicators of low-income immigrants.
Everybody, we need you to move down the hallway, please, down the hallway.
Sorry about that.
All right, no problem. Good morning, everyone. Happy to be here. My name is Rishi Sood. I'm from the New York City Health Department. I'm here to talk to you on behalf of both the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs and the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene on a new program that launched earlier this summer. We're in the middle of our enrollment period with just 3.5 weeks to go for enrollment in this first year, and we wanted to continue getting the word out about eligibility and enrollment for this program.
Okay.
Which one of these is?
Is that the? No, that's the one.
Okay.
Were you able to click that one?
Which one is forward?
Okay, it's this one going forward like that.
Thanks.
Yeah.
All right, so very quickly, just wanted to give an overview of where this came from, what the need is for it. Coverage rates in New York City. Among the total population, we've seen remarkable improvements in health insurance coverage thanks to the Affordable Care Act. Showing roughly 86% of people had health insurance as of 2013. You have the non-citizen population is disproportionately uninsured, and while they have made improvements since the Affordable Care Act, 35% of the non-citizens in New York City were uninsured. And then when you look at the undocumented population, which represents over 500,000 people in New York City, the pie chart flips and you're looking at nearly 2/3 of people who lack access to health insurance, but importantly, also lack access to affordable health insurance, even if they were to go buy private coverage outside of the state marketplace. So a huge population in New York City that could use a program like this. We estimate that 345,000 people are undocumented and uninsured, and 245,000 people are adults, and under 200% of the federal poverty level. So 19 years and over and under 200%. And that's important because all children in New York State are eligible for health insurance, affordable health insurance, regardless of immigration status. And so we're really focused on adults with this new health access program. So the timeline of this specific program that I'm going to talk to you about today is in March we had the first announcement about the details of the program. In April, the commissioners of the different agencies held a public forum to announce that enrollment would be beginning in just a few days. We began enrollment at 5 different sites across Manhattan and Queens on May 2nd. We've had a strong response, and enrollment will end on August 13th. Clinical services began on June 1st, so we're ending the second month soon of clinical services at the 8 primary care homes that I'll talk to you about. But again, the most important date here, August 13th, enrollment for this first year, for the first phase of this program, will end on August 13th. What is this program? So it's not health insurance. Importantly, it's not health insurance, but to a patient it mimics health insurance. This is a healthcare access program which provides a network of health facilities, much like somebody who has an insurance card knows which doctors are in network. It provides a network of community health centers and public hospitals, so in the entire network of New York City Health and Hospitals, but a specific focus on 2 of their facilities in the 2 neighborhoods that I'll talk to you about, Elmhurst and the Lower East Side of Manhattan, to begin. Very importantly, we include mental health and dental coverage within the program. IDNYC is the patient membership card.
their person who is in this program who has an ID-NYC, their ID-NYC looks just like mine. It's only that when they go to the doctor's office, they show their ID-NYC as I would, or maybe you would show your insurance card. The doctor's office then recognizes from the back end that they are a part of this program. There are predictable and affordable costs, which are modeled after the HHC options fee scale. So our community health centers have adopted the HHC options fee scale, which means that when somebody visits the doctor, they're only paying either $15 or $20, depending on their income, and everything that happens at that visit, including lab tests and any other screenings, are covered within that cost. The program encourages use of preventive and primary care services. There's intensive care coordination for those who have poorly controlled chronic conditions or uncontrolled chronic conditions, and I'll talk about those conditions a little bit. There's a very important customer service component here, that if somebody has a problem, they can call a number that will get them help in terms of, I was charged too much at my doctor's office, I need to change my primary care home because I don't live there anymore, I don't work there anymore, or for whatever reason they're having some issue with the program. And importantly, the foundation support that we have is allowing us to launch this program for the first year. We're funded by the Robin Hood Foundation, the Altman Foundation, and the Rockefeller Foundation, and the program is starting extremely small to allow the health department to do a very robust evaluation of what worked, with the intention to expand this program in future years to more neighborhoods and certainly to more people. Our participating healthcare providers in terms of our primary care homes are listed here. There's 4 in Queens with the New York City Health and Hospitals Elmhurst facility as our hospital, and 3 other primary care homes in Queens. We have 4 in Manhattan with New York City Health and Hospitals Gouverneur, as well as Charles B. Wong Community Healthcare Network and Ryan Nina. Very importantly, this does not mean that somebody can't get care at other health and hospitals facilities. Gouverneur has a partnership with Bellevue, where a lot of their patients get their specialty care at Bellevue. In that sense, Bellevue is in our network. All of health and hospitals is in our network for specialty care. That is, that care will all be coordinated by your care coordinator and doctor at your primary care home, and they will refer you out to specific facilities to get the care that you need. The outreach partners that we continue to have, we've had a few more in the past, but that we continue to have to this day and through August are listed here. We're doing focused outreach in different areas of Brooklyn, Queens, and Manhattan based on some of the knowledge we have about where people get their care. And we have already served people in over 20 languages. We've enrolled people who speak 22 different languages from over 60 countries from around the world, and have enrollees from all 5 boroughs. So it's not that actually this program is only open to the people in those 2 neighborhoods that I was talking about. We have enrollees from Staten Island, we have enrollees from the Bronx. The only thing that we want to be open about is that if you're enrolling in this program, in the first year you'll be getting your care in these 2 neighborhoods. But it might be that they work or have family in those neighborhoods. We're employing a number of different outreach strategies as we speak. Today, the deputy mayor and the first deputy commissioner of the health department will be on Spanish language TV show talking about this program. There was an op-ed that ran from our immigrant affairs commissioner in El Diario yesterday about healthcare options post Supreme Court decision for this population, which was partially about this program, and we look forward to working with you about working on different additional outreach strategies. So again, enrollment is open through August 13th at these 5 facilities: the Department of Health's Corona Health Center in Jackson Heights, and 4 health and hospitals facilities in Manhattan and Queens. Walk-ins are discouraged but sometimes accepted. We encourage all New Yorkers who may be eligible to call 311 and say Action Health. They can set you up with an appointment to see one of our staff within the next few days. The way appointment scheduling works is that first we want to make sure that nobody who's applying for this program or getting enrolled in this program is eligible for health insurance. Health insurance is better than this program, and there is no reason that you should be an Action Health member if you are qualifying for low or no cost health insurance. And so this is a 2-step process where you meet with a certified application counselor from either the health department, health and hospitals, or HRA, and they do an insurance screening for you. If it is found that you're uninsured and ineligible for insurance through the Affordable Care Act, then you are referred to our program enrollers. But if you are found to be eligible for health insurance, they will help you right then and there to enroll in health insurance. We have already seen over 200 people over the last few weeks coming in thinking they were eligible for Action Health, who we then enrolled in Medicaid or other low-cost health insurance. Or if somebody has already done an insurance screening, we don't want to make them go through that again. Our community-based organizations can also do that insurance screening. And if you speak to us directly, we can make sure that once we have that summary sheet from our community-based partners, we can put you right through to program enrollment as long as we know that you were screened by the marketplace. I will skip this slide just in the interest of time, and we can come back to it if there's questions about it. But I just want to end with the sort of specifics of the care model and what this program looks like once you actually get care at your primary care home, once you get through enrollment. The care model consists of baseline preventive screenings, so all recommended screenings from the Affordable Care Act's recommendations through the United States Preventive Services Task Force that are age and gender appropriate. Baseline care coordination for all patients, even the healthy patients, which includes a documented care plan, which the care coordinator will go through with each of their patients. Appointment reminders, so 2 days prior you'll get a phone call from your primary care home. Missed appointment outreach within 2 days if you don't show up to your appointment. And if your primary care home finds out that you were inpatient at a hospital or were at an emergency room, they will follow up with you within 5 days. Enhanced care coordination, which I briefly mentioned before, is for those who are sicker or on the path to being sicker. That's individuals with uncontrolled chronic conditions. So for example, a diabetic patient that doesn't have their A1C under control, and they will get additional care management support and more touches throughout the year from their doctor and from their care coordinator. Drilling down a little bit into enhanced care coordination, these are the conditions on the left side that would qualify somebody for enhanced care coordination. So if somebody has persistent asthma or uncontrolled diabetes or HIV, homelessness or housing unstable, if they tell us that they don't really have a place that they consider to be their own home, or they think that it might be unlikely that they have a place to live stably in the next few months. And then on the right side, it shows what those services include. So at least 6 contacts throughout the year from your care coordinator or doctor. Some of those might be phone calls if the doctor doesn't deem it necessary for you to have 6 visits. Pre-visit planning, so the care coordinator and the physician are working behind the scenes before you come in to figure out what they're going to be doing on your visit and what conversations are going to be necessary. And then the care coordinator will assist with referrals to other social services as needed, and also help with prescription medication refills and pickups. So I have our program director's contact information on this slide. I'm also happy to give out my card. Either of us can answer questions for you about this program. What I just want to stress is that we've seen a very, very strong response to this so far. It is a relatively lengthy enrollment process for 2 reasons. 1, because of the insurance screening, and 2, because we're doing this robust evaluation. And so we do want to encourage you to tell any New Yorker that you might know to call 311, make an appointment today, as we are eager to enroll more people before August 13th.
Could you share the PowerPoint with
Sure.
Councilor Morris, and we'll get it out to
We
everyone?
have it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We have it.
All right, we'll make sure we get it out to everyone.
Any
questions?
Yeah.
We'll go down this way. Start with Debbie?
Hi, I'm Debbie Quinones, Vice Chair, Committee Board 11, and I'm Chair of the Health and Human Services Committee. And one of the things that I'd like to find out is, this is just the first round. Is there going to be another round coming up, like uptown?
Yeah, so this is the first phase, certainly, of the program, and we are already beginning to look at results of the evaluation, including from the survey that we do at the outset, at the enrollment process. We have an intention within the next few months and next year to start looking at which neighborhoods we should be going to next. We're well aware that this population lives all across the city, and sort of pick 2 neighborhoods to begin to in part test the feasibility of even the enrollment structure of this program.
I'd like to get the evaluation of it.
Sure, yeah, so we can certainly talk offline if you contact me about more into the evaluation.
Yeah.
I didn't want to take time here just because of the limited time that we have, but I'm happy to speak to what we're looking at in the evaluation, all the way from the enrollment process and how valuable that was and what we found there, and then what we're looking at in terms of how we started to improve the health of this population.
Rishi, thank you very much for the presentation, and thank you for selecting Community Board 3 for these sites. We appreciate it. For one thing, I noticed in your list of partners that I don't believe any of those partners have offices in our district, and I'm sure we can help you with some partners that that are boots on the ground. Do we have?
Yeah, they said settlement houses, so.
Oh, okay, maybe I missed, okay, so, anyway, but, happy to help. I'd also, it sounds like your enrollment deadline's already set in stone, but, it's less than a month away, and I think it might not be a bad thing to consider extending that. I'm gonna yield the rest of my time to the district manager, who's probably got better questions and comments for you.
Actually, they're very much the same. I wanted to confirm for outreach. I wanted to confirm, because I did see somewhere on their settlement houses, are all the Lower East Side settlement houses involved? For instance, because I want to know if I have outreach ideas, can I work with them?
Absolutely. So we've been working with some of them, and we would welcome your help in sort of helping us step that up.
Okay, I'd be happy to do that. And also, what about for the homeless, do the street outreach workers, are they offering this service?
For the street homeless, we haven't done that. We haven't drilled down into that specifics yet. But the program is certainly open to people who might be uninsured and ineligible on that. And so we'd be happy to work.
I mean, we have a lot of homeless on
Right.
the streets, and they're visited several times a week by outreach workers who are, have their names. They're going back again and again, and they're doing case management for everyone now. So I think that would be a really good service to offer.
Okay, be happy to discuss that. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair Benjamin?
Yeah, I'm just a little, I don't want to be controversial here, but I'm just trying to understand how Community Board 11s and 12, particularly in the evaluation of where to start, how they would not have been an obvious place to go. And I'm just trying to understand a little bit the logic of how you picked these locations.
So I can say that when we look at where the uninsured, it starts with where the uninsured population, many who are eligible for health insurance, right, live in New York City. They are in nearly every neighborhood. And then when you drill into the self-pay population, or who is uninsurable because of their immigration status, and you look at where people get their care. Again, many hospitals, many health centers in every neighborhood of New York City, but we really were focusing on where the largest number of this population might be getting their care, even if they don't live there. And so, for example, we do know that a lot of people from Sunset Park in different neighborhoods in Brooklyn travel into Gouverneur and that area of Manhattan, the Lower East Side of Manhattan, to get their care there. And so we've already seen tons of enrollees from Sunset Park and Borough Park because they may work in that area. And so that was sort of like what factored into that. Okay. As I said, as we look to scale this program up, we know this is needed in East Harlem. We know this is needed in many, many neighborhoods in the Bronx. Right. And there are sort of many strategies which are going to be underway in terms of figuring out where to go next.
Thank you. I saw a hand up there, yes?
Stephanie from Speaker Melissa Margaret's office. So, you said it ends August, right? Do we know when we're gonna start up again doing this, in case people don't get a chance?
When enrollment would start up again? Yeah. We don't know that. I think certainly we, as I said, the clinical services began on June 1st, and that first year of clinical services will technically end on June 30th of the following year, and that's for the evaluation purposes. That's why it needs to be set in stone in that sense. We don't know when enrollment would start up again, but we're optimistic that in 2017 we would be able to, for a year or two, open up another enrollment period.
So people who have already enrolled, how long are they enrolled for? Just for the year?
So they're formally enrolled, because this was funded by private foundations, they're formally enrolled for that 1 year, or technically 13 months if they started getting services on June 1st. But we're optimistic that if this program continues, those are going to be people who we offer the opportunity to renew. Technically, if this program ends and is not funded, then the patients would still have the ability to continue getting their care at those sites, but not formally under this program.
Anthony DeSalvo from Community Board 1, thank you very much. Following up on that, if you mentioned this is privately funded, is there a maximum capacity you could handle based on that funding now?
Yeah, so the private funding is supporting our evaluation, our outreach and enrollment efforts, and our payments to providers.
Right.
Certainly in future years, if this were to scale to more than the up to 1,200 that we have, the answer to your question is we are able to support only for 1,200 people in this first pilot year. Right. After that, we'd be looking for to go beyond private funding in order to serve many more than that.
Okay, thank you.
Any other hands? I just have one question, and since it's privately funded, what have been some of the legal issues around medical records? And if there's any pretext for the medical records from the private fundedness of this program?
So the private funding hasn't led to any issues there. As you can imagine, we have many agreements in place between all the parties, all the different city agencies, and our clinical partners. So the health centers and hospitals, we have a project agreement that allows for, with patient consent, and HIPAA consent from the patient as well, sharing of the records that we're looking at for the evaluation. So that has not been a hindrance in that sense. Everything is being done with the consent of the patient and with the consent of all the parties, which includes the agencies as well as the health center and hospital sites. I do have materials here in French, simplified Chinese, Spanish, and then we have, those are the one-page flyers, and then we have brochures which are available in 8 languages. And so the brochure is just an 8-page pull-out, and there's one language on each page. And so if anybody would like to take some of these, certainly feel free to, and certainly can contact me if you need more. We can mail out from our office within a day to anywhere that you think it might be good. You just tell me the language and what organization and attention to who, and we can get these flyers mailed out to that organization. We've been doing that a lot.
Can you email a PDF version of those flyers?
Absolutely. Yep. If you just let me know which ones, we'd be happy to send out even multiple languages.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So now we have community board chair updates, again, for the benefit of our online viewership, which we do have a growing viewership online. Please state your name and the community board that you're chair of, and your name and the council member that you represent. We'll start this time around, we'll mix it up. We'll start, and if there's no update, sometimes there's no update, that's fine. We'll start with community board 12. Any updates, community board 12?
Hi, my name is Osi Kamina, I'm representing Community Board 12 today. So this month we had a meeting with EDC in regards to the Inwood rezoning. There was a big meeting that was a community of the whole of Community Board 12 on the 19th, and a lot of residents show up in protest of the new proposed rezoning of Inwood. We also had a community outreach at the New York Presbyterian First Annual Community Day that was in Washington Heights. We had a table there right along Borough President table. This is the second time that we are doing that. We're trying to reach out to the community and go to the community for people that cannot come to the meetings in the evenings. We have a conversation with them in different places around our district during the day, mostly on the weekend. And lastly, we had, the naming of the start line at the Armory track under Mayor David Dickens.
That's today,
That
right?
is happening today, I believe, starting in half an hour.
What is it?
It's the Armory on 168th Street and between Broadway and Fort Washington.
Do you mean the street?
No,
No.
it's the Armory, it's a track and field.
Track and field.
So we're
Right.
gonna name the start line after Mayor David Dinkins.
What, not a tennis court?
Thank you for that. The Community Board 12, Community Board 11?
Good morning, my name is Debbie Quinones, I'm the vice chair, and I guess an update is that we had a public hearing this Tuesday, and I think that we're really facing some new opportunities to do better with preparing for all the zoning changes and all the new developments, and I think we have questions that we have to ask ourselves and how to have a better relationship with developers so that we can seek affordability and what does that really mean? The other thing is that we've received some funding. Oh, see, there she is right there. And I'm excited about it because it's with my committee. So it's, we received some funding for a SOS. It's called the Spirit of Service Festival, where what we're gonna do is we're gonna match people that need volunteers with people that wanna volunteer. So that then we can have an opportunity to kind of build more of a civic structure in the community. And we're excited about that, so we need help, so if you want to help us. And the other thing is that basically we're really looking at how to engage in more policy discussions, and we had some work done in kind of evaluating that, and now we're gonna move forward. And that's what I have, but I don't know what she has.
I will only add that everyone's familiar with the Church of Scientology.
Oh.
They have built 2 new beautiful buildings on 125th Street. And they wanted to close off 125th Street for their 40,000 membership celebration, which the board was totally against, naturally. 25th Street. However, I want to say that we worked everything out, and I want to thank, of course, the Borough President's Office, SAPO, as well as the actual business, Church of Scientology, actually listened to what the community wanted, which was to put it across the street at a huge parking lot, and SAPO worked with us to close the sidewalks. So the celebration will go on as they want it on 125th Street. No, just not closing the corridor, but so just wanted to point that out as well.
Thank you so much. Community Board 10?
Sure. First of all, I want to introduce myself. My name is Brian Benjamin. I'm the recently elected chair of Community Board 10. And thank you. And so this is my first time being here. One of the things that we're focusing a lot on in Community Board 10 is we're dealing with a homeless shelter issue. We just had a recent meeting, and I've been on the board for 6 years. We just had a recent meeting. Our health committee had a meeting talking about a proposed relocation of a homeless shelter from 126 to 127th to 136th Street in a former center, which was sold by a community center to a church. I'm sorry, to a church for $7 million. And we had about 125 people at a committee meeting, a health committee meeting. I mean, it was just incredible. Just up in arms about sort of dealing with the DHS and the lack of transparency and what's going to happen with this new shelter in what's a residential neighborhood. Now, we all know that homelessness is a big issue in our city. And we just had a forum on homelessness, and everyone believes that we should find homes for the homeless, except when you say where. And once you get to the where, it becomes a whole other issue. So we have this issue on 36th Street. We also have, at the same time, a big issue with one of our parks, where we have a number of homeless folks in the parks, and we're getting stories of kids seeing defecation and urination in front of them, and people saying, you need to move folks out of the park. Okay, well, where are we going to move them to? So we're putting together some conversations, and we're trying to have a comprehensive issue. And I don't know if other community boards are dealing with the same issue, but for us, this is a really big problem, and we want to be sort of fair to both sides here. And so that's going to take up a lot of my new time. We're supposed to be off during the summer, and I'm not sure if I'm going to get any time off. But I'm glad to be a new chair, and I'm glad to be attending these meetings. So, hi.
And welcome as a chair. I apologize, I didn't chair the June meeting, so I thought in June you were here or introduced, so I apologize for that.
Okay.
But we welcome you as a new chair.
Thank you so much.
Community Board 9?
Sure, my name is Victor Edwards, second vice chair, Community Board 9. Earlier this month we had a HDFC forum. We had about 150 people who turned out, very successful. We had management companies, HPD came, shareholders, and one of the biggest things was trying to encourage shareholders to participate more, not just sit on the sidelines. And I think the meeting we had this morning kind of followed up right into that, so that was really good. Given the state of some of the HDFCs in our community as well, it was very informative. Secondly, we're working with the Boys and Girls Club of Harlem, which will be located at the old PS 186 on Broadway between 145th between Broadway and Amsterdam. They should be taking occupancy late September or beginning October. This school has been vacant for over 35 years. Now it's going to house the Boys and Girls Club and also 78 units of affordable housing. So we're really excited about that. So those are some of the things going on in CP9.
That structure, that's the first time I've seen a tree grow out of like a
Yes.
floor right across the roof of the building.
Yeah.
Pretty wild. Shows you trees could grow anywhere. Community Board 8.
Yeah, Cos Bangaletti standing in for Chair Jim Pines. The biggest thing we're working on, or Community Board 8, and I think we had quite a bit of help from certain council members and Board 6 also, is the Queensborough Oval. The tennis bubble there is certain amount, 9-10 months of the year. When they vacate, it gets left that the kids can't use it. We don't have very much parkland on the east side. Unlike the west side, it's basically all parkland. So what we'd like to do is get that oval to be available all year round to the community. The other one is the crosstown bike lanes that just came in. We were opposed to several streets, but DOT went ahead. That's a done deal, I guess. The other one is the Link NYC kiosks that are going up all over the place. It's wireless, but these are 8, 10, 12 feet tall, 3, 4 feet wide. Do they need to be that big? Is it for the Wi-Fi or for the ads? I've got a Wi-Fi at home. It's about 6 by 6 by 2. So, that's the other thing. The MTS is still an ongoing issue. And apart from that, we're running smooth.
Nice.
Thank you.
Thank you. Community Board 7. Let the record show that Community Board 7 Chair Elizabeth Caputo was here. I believe she had to step out. Community
Yes.
Board 6.
Hi, Rick Eggers, Chair of Community Board 6. Brian has learned early that you never say there's a slow period on the board. I spent the whole year saying, oh, we'll deal with that in the summer when it's slower. Doesn't happen. We've had the same kind of problems with the homeless shelter that has been happening up in your area. It's actually our street homeless issue is far greater than we have the largest men's shelter in the city in Midtown, East Midtown. People don't really think about that. I've been told it's the largest men's shelter in the country. But our problems are more from the kind of quality of life issues you were talking about that our neighbors are experiencing. It's a very difficult problem for us to tackle. But our biggest problem right now is construction congestion. I'm bringing this up every month, but we have a lot of projects going on in a very small area. The residents are getting increasingly agitated by projects taking 2, 3, 4 times as long as estimated and costing 2, 3, 4 times as much as they said they would. The most recent is a proposal for a ventilation of the subway, the Lexington Avenue line, taking place in Murray Hill along Park Avenue. It seems to be an appropriate emergency necessity, but the neighbors are very concerned about the timing, the addition of the work to the everything else that's going on. And they are getting squeezed from both sides. So it's a very difficult thing for us to deal with, but we'll have to deal with it in the next few months. We had a fatality at the intersection of 58th and 2nd on July 1st. A van ran into a pedestrian crossing the street. This intersection has had one serious accident every week, DOT and other accidents as well, but one a week involving injury or death. DOT has been, their own data shows that this has been a real problem. They've been working on it as part of a larger piece. They're going to do bike lanes and other changes along 2nd Avenue, but they have not addressed the hotspot intersections that we've been bringing to their attention for the last few years. So we did bring this particular intersection to their attention again. It's been favorably received at a meeting that we held at our Transportation Committee, and hopefully we can get a quick response. All it's going to take is something like a left turn signal or a leading pedestrian interval where they get a chance for the pedestrians to get off early because it's a rather wide street. Anyway, there are things that can be done. Hopefully they'll get done, but it gets very, very frustrating. And I think that's it. Oh, well, I just wanted to say about Link NYC. We're having some problems with people camping out at the Wi-Fi post. Overall, people are kind of appreciate it as a place where you can charge your device and all this kind of thing. But somebody at one intersection actually has a chair, and he sits there and watches movies on the internet. Wow, and it's available there. Now, it's not what we intended it to be, but it'll be very interesting to see. It has a great, the concept behind it is really, really good.
Right, I agree.
But some of the implementation still needs to be worked out. That's
I
it.
think we have to worry when they start selling popcorn around.
Yeah, exactly.
That'll happen.
Well, it's an income source.
And when it gets really difficult for chairs, just think that. I thought you were going to mention the story that Rick Eggers had the distinction, probably the only chair distinction, of being a district manager at the same time of having to be chair.
It's true. Acting
Waiting to hire
district manager.
For about 2 months. So Community Board 5,
They work here.
okay, they were here as well.
Yeah.
Community Board 4,
They work here too.
Community Board 3, Chair Rogers.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jamie Rogers. I was also recently elected at our June full board meeting, so I'm looking forward to getting to know everybody and to learning about all the issues that you all are facing because, as you all already all probably know, we operate a little bit in silos, and Borough Board is kind of the one opportunity that that our board has to hear about what's going on in the rest of the city. We actually do have a number of sort of cross-board issues going on right now, one of which is the reduction in services at Beth Israel Mount Sinai, and that's something that we're monitoring very closely. We're both the impact to our community members and also the proposed sort of changing of where different facilities will be. We also have, last night actually we had a kind of a kickoff meeting for what they call the Lower Manhattan Coastal Resiliency Project that the Mayor's Office of Resiliency and Recovery is overseeing, and Community Board 1 has their piece of this pie. We have our piece which is between the Brooklyn Bridge and Montgomery Street along the waterfront. In addition to that, also in that same area, we've had a lot of proposed development by some private developers for, as of right, extremely tall buildings, some as high as 1,000 feet, about 4 or 5 tentative proposals in with the Department of City Planning. Our community, our board has worked extensively with the community over many years to develop a zoning plan for that area, plus core Chinatown and the NYCHA campuses along the waterfront. So we're very wary of this private development and hopeful that the city will work with us to make sure that there are responsible choices made in the development of our community. Finally, also regarding development, there's been a lot of controversy around the removal of a deed restriction, 2 elements of a deed restriction, which affected a former AIDS hospice, which was supposed to be a nursing home in our community called Rivington House. That also, I know, has affected several other community boards, the lifting or revision of deed restrictions. There's investigations that are being reports being released about it, and the mayor's office is making proposals as to how to act going forward. We're staying on top of those conversations, and we hope that can be a borough-wide conversation with respect to how we all as community boards look at proposed changes to deed restrictions. That's about all we got right now, other than there are a lot of homeless people hanging out in Tompkins Square Park, but there may have always been homeless people in Tompkins Square Park, so unfortunately not new for us, but we're we, like all of you, are trying to get a handle on this.
A central role around the lifting of D restrictions. About, I believe, 2 days ago, the borough president held a press conference with Councilmember Margaret Chin. Councilmember Margaret Chin has proposed legislation on behalf of the borough president regarding a process of review for lifting of D restrictions that mirrors or is actually a ULERP type process. So,
Yesterday.
Not legislation exactly, we're just calling for a process whereby city planning requests that the council change, add deed restriction removal to the ULERP process.
there you go. So that happened hot off the press, I think, just yesterday. Community Board 2?
Here. I'm Terry Cood, First Vice Chair of Community Board 2. I'll just do a quick past, present, and future. For past, thank you very much to the Borough President's Office as well as community groups, elected officials, and Community Board 2 co-sponsored an Accessibility and Resources Day where more than 100 seniors and people with mobility challenges were able to find out more and ask questions to Accessoride, a visiting neighbors program, get their blood pressure checked. It was done outdoors, and we'd like to thank all those who participated in that. For present, and coming up in a few hours, we have the St. John's redevelopment, which involves the Hudson River Park creation of a special district to create a more than an approximately 2 million square foot development, and we're trying to get some control over that, whereby it will be some knit into a community that right now our resolution is going to try to create something that works integrally rather than create its own silo. Our next upcoming issue is the NYU 2031 plan, the long and hard-fought battle there. The construction of that is starting, and we're hoping to have as much input and control over construction effects over what will be a 2 million square foot in 2 super blocks development. As far as future, obviously land use liquor license applications and pressure to increase profitability on both land and on landlord return are still creating a great deal of pressure and a whole lot of work, as I think we all have as Manhattan grows. And small businesses are still a very strong concern in that there are more and more vacant storefronts as landlords hold out for the higher rents or the credit tenant. Bus service, we're still seeking bus service restoration through Community Board 2's area. And the Beth Israel Mount Sinai issue, thank you for bringing that up. That impact will be very great on Community Board 2 as well. We lost the St. Vincent's Hospital, and Beth Israel was our closest. And so we welcome participation to the degree possible in having some input on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Community Board 1?
Good morning, I'm Anthony Nassau. I'm part of the freshman class of new chairs. So I'm looking forward to working with you all and maybe getting some of your experiences. But I'm not new to the community board. I've been on our board for 16 years and have enjoyed it, all the fun and the stressful times. And it is amazing how there are so many issues that everyone has mentioned that there's more commonality than there is difference. So every neighborhood's a little different, so there are unique things. But since the redevelopment and the tragedy at the World Trade Center, we still have 90 development sites in the 1.5 mile area. And so we'd love to talk to you because we had some help for the city for some time on coordinating that, but it is amazing the impact that it has. Even on things as unglamorous as sanitation or garbage collection. And so those are issues. We don't have the homeless situation that other communities have, but we have more than we've ever had. And so we would love to share in some of those ideas. We had our first fatality on West Street about 3 weeks ago, and that was because Route 9A and the New York State DOT, as they rebuilt that after 9/11, there's a major bike path and walkway along West Street. everybody's in competition, and in this situation, if you make a right-hand turn, you have a high probability of hitting a cyclist or a pedestrian, because everyone has a green light. And so these are issues we can all work on together. Jamie's right, resiliency is a major issue for Lower Manhattan, for Community Board 1. We'll have our session tonight here with, under the auspices of the Borough President, which we're very happy to. So we'll kick off, we'll start off tonight. One other item that's become troubling to us is because of all of our development and land use, deed restrictions, we're also finding that the ULURP process has become a little troubling. We have a major redevelopment going on at the South Street Seaport and Howard Youth Corporation. And they have wonderful lawyers who know how to time things to bring to a board where we have to do a resolution before the ULURP clock starts. Well, today they're getting certified, and tomorrow we have our full board meeting to even write a resolution, but the clock starts today. And so we'll probably be talking to more people, maybe the Borough President, about how do we get that 30-day window. It's not necessarily enough, and some of these good land use lawyers know how to play that timing very effectively.
It's a big problem.
Big problem.
Big
Isn't it a 60-day window?
60-day
window.
60-day
It's
for you, 30 for us.
30 for you. Right?
Yeah. So
It's never enough. They time it exactly.
They know how to time
I know when it is.
Exactly. So I know it's been a long meeting, but I'm looking forward to sharing some of the experiences. Two things. Can we get a copy of the slides that we used for HPD this morning?
They gave you the physical.
We have that,
copy.
but can I get a?
We can ask them for the electronic one.
That would be fine. And do we have a contact sheet for all of the chairs?
The contact sheet for all the community board chairs?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can make that available. And again, congratulations to all the new community board chairs.
Thank you.
Council member updates.
Very quick. Hi, I'm Corey. I'm from Councilmember Gorodnick's office, and our only update is also to share that I'm a new hire in his office. I am the communications director. I'm also going to be the representative on Borough Board. I just finished the Coro Fellows program in public affairs. I'm very excited to work with all of you and see you at these meetings.
Excellent. Welcome.
Thank you.
Corey, what's your last name?
Epstein.
Epstein. Yeah.
Are there other council member updates? Borough President updates?
So just a couple of items. Hi everyone, Lucille Songhai, Director of Community Affairs for the Borough President. Our capital funding allocations are now online on our website, so we really encourage chairs and community board members to take a look and see what we've allocated in your community board districts. If you have specific questions, we can certainly get our Director of Budgets, Vlad Martinez, to talk with you further about the allocations that we made this year. And we've distributed over $26 million, so very exciting to see a lot of the projects that have been underway that have needed additional funding getting funded and completed. As Aldrin said, we had our deed restriction press conference yesterday that went really well. Got a lot of press on it, and we really think that holding folks accountable and making the process transparent is really where this needs to go, so that we can avoid another Rivington House and also avoid another Dance Theater of Harlem incident. Another piece. Last night we held a forum on systemic racism at St. John the Divine Cathedral on the west side. We had over 100 people come together. 200, sorry, yes, over 200 people come together. Was a lot of people. And really having an opportunity to sit around at round tables with facilitators to talk as much as we could about, how we can confront some of these issues that have been coming up from a lot of the shootings that have happened, as well as the police shootings that have happened. We're holding another one tonight on the east side at the Harlem RBI Dream Charter School, and that will be from 6 to 8 p.m. tonight. Dinner will be provided. If you know anyone on the east side of Manhattan that would want to participate and come, we really do encourage folks to be there. Okay? I'm trying to think of anything.
I'll just add two quick things about the budget. One is for the capital grants. We really do would love you to take a look at it. You know, it's one thing to allocate money for capital projects, it's another thing for the projects to happen. So we really need to hear about when projects are happening or when they're not happening, because we need to follow up. And, you know, we give to a lot of different schools and parks, and, you know, we want to make sure that these projects actually move forward now that they have funding. So we really love to be in touch with you about that. And then also in terms of funding, the borough president has some small expense grants, I forget what we call them, the Manhattan.
MCAP.
Community Award Program.
Community Award Program.
Community Award Program, that's it. Those are gonna be available, starting in August. They'll be announced on our website, and again, they're small grants, they're $3,000 to $5,000, but, you know, for community organizations, sometimes that can be a big help, so keep your eye out for them. They'll be on our website, and we'll do a blast about it as well when that money's available.
Do community boards count?
Yes.
First on the list.
You know, encourage your community organizations that you work with to apply, though.
Yeah, thank you very much, all. I know this meeting went a little longer than scheduled. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No opposed?
There you go, Morris. Thank you very much.
I will collect the signs,
No,
no
it wasn't
worries.
here in June.
Yeah, it was confusing.